Welcome back to Introduction to Computer Science at SSFS. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about getting information back from a function. Last lesson we talked about sending information to a function. Today we're going to get that information back. And the one thing that you should remember, if nothing else from this lesson, is that a function should only do one thing. If it's starting to do too much, it means you need to create a different function. Another thing to consider is that functions are kind of like a black box. You've used a lot of functions already so far in this class. For example, the type function, which tells you what type of variable something is, whether it's a string, a float, or an int. You don't know how it does that because the function just does it and returns some information to you. It gives you some information back. It's essentially a black box. It does it, but we don't need to know how it does it in order to use that function. So when we had our area of a rectangle function, it was actually a pretty simple one, but we don't necessarily need to know how it calculated the area, just that it's calculating it for us, and we hope that it's going to do it correctly. So again, we have in our current area of a rectangle function, we have it calculating the area and then printing it. But that assumes that the user wants to print it every time. Maybe they don't. So we need to make our functions as generic and flexible as possible. So I'm going to take this print area out. Let's go ahead and run that now and see what happens. It runs. I have no errors. It means it worked fine. But notice I didn't get any information back. So after I run the function, let's go ahead and print the area. So we'll let the main function handle that. Okay, so it's going to have the length and the height. It's going to do the area of a rectangle function, passing the length and the height, and print the area out. And those sharp eye of you may have seen there's already a red squiggle there. This probably is going to throw up an error, but let's just go ahead and see. And it does. It says the global name area is not defined. So it doesn't know what this area is. That's because area only exists within the scope of this function here. The main function has no idea what area is. So we have to find some way to get this area back to the main function. And the way we do that is by the use of a keyword called return. And what do we want to return? We want to return area. And again, that sends the area back to this main function. Okay? So let's go ahead and run it again, now that it's returning. And we still get the same error, global area is not defined. That's because when we ran the area of a rectangle function, it went up to here, it calculated the length and the height, it returned it, but it didn't save it anywhere. It had nowhere to store it. So we could do a couple of different things here. We could save it to a new variable and call it rectangle area equals area of a rectangle. And so what that'll do is it'll take the area of a rectangle, whatever value is returned is assigned to this variable. And then I could print it out, rectangle area. And let's run that and see if that works. And it does. I get 100, which is the correct value. So again, what's happening here is it's assigning the value of 10 to L and the value of 10 to H. It's passing those values to the area of a rectangle function. They go to the length and the height. It calculates the area. It returns that value to this statement. It assigns that return value to this variable, and it prints it out. Since the area of a rectangle result is being assigned to this variable, and then I'm printing out that variable in the next step, most of the time what you'll see is in computer code, we'll take that and just print that result out directly. If I need to use that area somewhere else, I can certainly assign it to a variable. If I'm just printing it, I just print what the result of that function is. Let's go ahead and print that. And I get the same result. So I'm just kind of taking a shortcut there to simplify my code. One thing to understand about functions is as soon as it hits the return keyword, it returns control back to where that function was called. So if there were statements after the area of a rectangle function, after I hit return, and actually you can see when I hit enter, it indents all the way to the left, assuming that the function's over. I could manually tab over and say print Eric was the funniest Python. And save that. And again, I'm not getting any errors. Let's print that. But notice that print statement doesn't get executed because as soon as this function sees the return, control goes back to here. So return is usually the last line in your function. So that's how you get information back from a function. Use the return keyword. In the final lesson of this unit, we're going to kind of put everything together and look at a complete program that prints instructions, gets input from the user, does some calculations, and prints answers, all using functions.